Yeah, I was gonna ask about personal branding, and I know that you have like a tip that that holds people back, or that holds female founders back when it comes to
But
personal
also,
branding.
ironically, the woman who is a seven-figure business owner and has worked with all the celebrities and has accumulated
Does not
the
post on
business.
Instagram.
Your clients have amassed over $30 million this year that you've helped them make. You don't really have a personal brand. So tell us the tips of what we should be doing in our personal brand.
I know. And I'm actually going to start I've really been focusing on my own content because it's just so, it's like, I just am so lit up by building everybody else's brands, and I get so involved, and it's just so I almost don't have time for my own, but it is something that I really want to, start doing because it's just, it's important because I feel like I'm gatekeeping a lot of this information. But, I think working with celebrities and working with female entrepreneurs, very high net worth individuals and everyone in between, it's there's a part of someone, everyone has a part of their story that they almost don't want to share, right? Or they feel it's their flaws. They're this is too vulnerable, this is too weird. There's some sort of part of themselves that they really sort of hold secret because they just don't think their audience will relate to it, or they're ashamed, or it's too vulnerable. And that's actually the piece that is the most connective for your audience. Any kind of flaw that you have, anything that you're sort of hiding, anything that you're kind of keeping in the shadow, that's the stuff that I really encourage all of my clients to come forward with, because that's the thing that ends up being the most connective, or people end up resonating with the most. It's that those parts of ourselves that we tend to hide. And so, and anytime I've worked with someone who's really I have this story, but I'm just, holding back because I just don't think it's resonant, or I don't think people will relate to my lifestyle. Or, I had a client who travels all the time, and she would travel first class, or she would be I don't want people to see that I'm going on this extravagant trip, and it's you are an expander. Yes, people are very triggered by, and I think Lauren Bostic also gets this because she's flying private, or she's on a yacht, and people are she makes so much money now, she's unrelatable, or whatever. It's there are just parts of your story that you have to embrace, because we all need expanders. We need people that are expanding us for what we think is possible from a wealth perspective or a brand perspective. We need to know that we can be making $100,000 one year and have a $10 million brand in the next 5 years. We need to know that that's possible for ourselves. So I find that women, especially men, don't give a shit. Men will be I'm flying private, I'm doing all these things, and they'll just literally shout it from the rooftops. And you don't need to share everything, but it's some of those things that we feel are too, when we're too much for people. And this is just a problem that women have. This is just something that women experience specifically. That's the stuff that I always say to share.
We've talked a lot about this on the podcast, because I ran into a problem last year where I felt as if there's a trap with the personal brand stuff, which is that we can focus so much on it and content creating for the personal brand because we think it supports the bigger business, but then we neglect the bigger business.
Right.
And the personal brand content creation doesn't actually catapult you. The energy, if you took away 50% of the energy on that bucket and put it into the bucket of the business would go up. So I've really taken a step back from social myself.
Right.
And I'm trying to rethink about who I am as a personal brand on the internet, not relating to the title of content creator, not relating to the title of influencer, but wanting to build a brand that I see the next 10 years of very clearly, but I'm having difficulties placing where I land in it as the personal brand, because part of me doesn't want to put my face on my editorial site because I don't want it to be a blog. I want it to be editorial, and I don't want it to be all about me. I want it to be about everybody else. But we live in a world where there is that founder trust that people love. So Goop is Goop because of Gwyneth Paltrow. Poosh is Poosh because of Kourtney Kardashian. Frenchie's Frenchie because of Ashley Tisdale.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the balance in building out businesses that aren't necessarily our an influencer account, right? My face.
Yeah.
But having a personal brand that is complementary to it, but doesn't take away your energy.
I think, I'll give an example of how I've seen this been done really well. And I think the solution is you really can only afford to build that big of a personal brand after you've built the business. One, because you then have a lot of teachings. You have
Yes.
so much wisdom to deliver.
Yeah.
The person that I think of the most is Alex Lieberman, the founder of Morning Brew. He built Morning Brew. He sold Morning Brew. Now he is a huge thought leader. All he really does is podcast, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And he's amazing.
Yeah.
But like he doesn't really do Morning Brew anymore.
Right.
But like he couldn't have gotten there unless he built Morning Brew. And I don't think he even could have done everything he's doing right now in tandem with Morning Brew.
Right, right.
So
You're so
I
right.
kind of think it's like you build it and then you can be that. Yes,
Right.
of course you could share along the way, whatever. But I just don't think it needs to be the focal point. Whereas like right now, that's his focal point.
Yeah.
I don't think it could have been the same time.
Yeah, because I
Right.
see myself, I was writing in my journal and I was calling in my future self to give me advice. And it was like, what do I really want? I want to be respected for the work that I do
Yeah.
versus the personal brand that I personally cultivated.
Right.
I want my work to create my personal brand versus my personal brand create my work.
Right, right.
And that can get like difficult to weed through when we see people always on the internet. And we obviously I live in the space. It's been a
Yeah.
huge unlearning for me to figure out what
Right.
works for me. So
I think someone also that you should look to is Sif from Array, right? So she is building Array,
Yeah.
and it is actually in tandem with her.
Yeah.
She did have a personal brand before.
she does do a little bit more. She's coming on the podcast. I can't wait to talk to her. She
Yeah.
does do a little more content creation
Yeah.
than
she
even
does.
I am.
But she was a content creator
interested.
before,
She was
so
a
this-
content creator before. Yeah.
Right.
Anyways, but
And sometimes
So basically,
and
what's
so-
my personal
Yeah.
brand?
right. And listen, sometimes it's not so like it's like chicken and egg, right?
Yeah.
Because you could be building an amazing brand and also like building a personal brand if that's what really fulfills you and makes you happy, where they're like happening synonymously. Because like Sif, for example, is like building Array, and then she like has her podcast and she has like, you know, her personal sort of like content vertical, and like it's a driver. They drive to each other, but they also kind of like stand alone, right?
Yeah. I guess that's what this podcast is for me.
Yeah, right. And the thing is like, I think with you, with like your new brand too, it's like you're going to like, that's going to deliver value to people because your like level of curation and your experience like as an entrepreneur and like the people that you're interviewing, things like that, it's going to just bring so much value. Like any brand that brings value to somebody is going to do well, like when it's really specific and it's really nuanced and it really like is clear about what it's delivering, right? Like Morning Brew, it's like very clear about like what that delivers as a brand, who it helps, like who it serves, right? So it's like that just has to be dialed in. And you're the person too who's like, you know, you're doing this podcast, you're interviewing entrepreneur, like you're like in the mix, right? And so they tend to feed each other. And I think that the lines are becoming like a little bit more blurred than ever, because it used to be just like you worked behind a brand and you built that and then you know exited, because you can't actually exit a personal brand.
Yeah.
Like, if you want- and that's
that's
why-
where Maddie's falling into
Right.
a trap right now a little bit. Yeah.
Right. But like, you know, with Camber, it's like you could sell Camber, right? You could sell what you're building. That's, you know,
Well, no, because her face is so on camera.
no, but I
But-
could still sell it.
Yeah, eventually.
yeah. You can still sell it and still be the face of it for
Right.
a certain amount of time and then have someone else take over. It's like, you know, and then you can also, again, evolve it where your face is coming out of it a little bit more. So it just, there's a trajectory. But, you know, if you're like, you know, Maddie.com and that's just, that's
Yeah,
it. It's
yeah.
like that. I mean, because there have been some influencers that have actually sold their personal brand. They actually end up selling their name. And then like a bigger conglomerate owns their name. They have to like actually change their name. So it's like, it's just,
It's hard.
It's
Yeah.
harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I
Wow.
guess that's where Lauren Bostic did it right too, because the Skinny Confidential is not her name.
Right. Well, because if she wants to exit, you know, it's like you always want to begin with the end in mind. I think
Yeah.
that's why it's important to have, you know, a name and a company that like some, you know, something kind of it can be absorbed where
Yeah,
if
Yeah.
it's
that
a
makes
name.
sense.
Right.
A long game.
Okay, I could talk to obviously.
I know.
You
We could talk.
You
We
know.
could talk to you
And we will,
forever.
you know,
Yeah, I
we'll be
could-
talking a lot offline too.
I love every time I talk to you. It is so invigorating and so supportive, and it doesn't feel overwhelming,
Likewise.
and it feels
Yeah.
really inspiring. Really inspiring. What you've built is incredible. You are a model of an agency owner, a business, an entrepreneur,
Thanks.
etc. You're about to launch a new brand I want to hear about. But first, before you tell all the details around that,
Yeah.
we ask every woman who comes on OK Sister podcast this: if you could brag about one thing and you weren't allowed to be humble, what would you brag about?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know. I think like my biggest flex is that, you know, I just like I love my clients, I love the famous people I've worked with, but like I really love building a team and running a business and a company that like is so different from the ones that I worked in. When I was 20, 21, you know, I worked at Condé Nast. It was scary. It was like toxic. Every woman was like looking over her shoulder to see who was going to like stab her in the back to get her position. Or it was like this really weird, it was just like this really like fucked up toxic club almost. And I just love that I've just built a culture that's so different than that, you know? And I think
really nice.
that has to be the biggest flex, because that's always what I set out to do. And I've achieved that. So, you know, the celebrity names and like the shiny objects are fun and great and whatever. But like, if I could not do like this piece, it just wouldn't feel fulfilling. So I think that that's the biggest flex.
You know what? I concur with that in my own personal life, because I built a work culture that is so awesome that they told us that we couldn't build as women.
Right.
And it feels, it is, you're right, one of the most fulfilling parts of the whole process.
Yeah.
Yeah.